Picture this. You sign a lease. You pay first month, last month, security deposit. You move your furniture in. You make this place yours. And then one morning, a steel column on the 21st floor starts to bend. New York City has over 1 million buildings. Most of them are fine, but some of the most famous, most expensive addresses in the entire city are quietly falling apart, and in several cases the people inside had absolutely no idea. Buildings with doormen and waiting lists. Buildings the city inspected, certified, and approved as safe. Sometimes just weeks before something went catastrophically wrong. 5 buildings, 5 stories of structural failure, ignored warnings, and in one case, a secret kept from the public for 17 years. Let's start with the most recent one, because it happened last month. Number 5, 235 East 42nd Street, the former Pfizer Tower, July 2026. It is 8 a.m. on a Tuesday in Midtown Manhattan, July 7, 2026. Construction workers arrive at 235 East 42nd Street, a glass and steel skyscraper 2 blocks from Grand Central. Once Pfizer's global headquarters, now being converted into 1,600 rental apartments, the largest office-to-residential conversion in New York City history. Then someone on the 21st floor notices something wrong. A steel column is bending. Not cracking, not settling, bending. One worker later described watching a beam fold in half in front of him. Windows cracked, concrete fell, and every construction worker in the building made the same decision at the same time. They ran. By mid-morning, the FDNY had shut down several blocks of one of the busiest corridors in Manhattan. A nearby school evacuated 400 children, and Mayor Zohran Mamdani stood in front of cameras and said 3 words: "Nobody wants to hear about a skyscraper in the middle of their city." This is an extremely serious situation. By afternoon, the building was still moving. Engineers brought in emergency trusses. It took until late that night to stabilize the structure. The city had complaints about this site since spring 2025. 7 violations issued between July and December of that year. A metal panel had already fallen from the 33rd floor onto the sidewalk. 22 violations on record, going back to 2020. Think of it like a car. 1 dashboard warning light, maybe. 7 warning lights, and the car is still on the road? That is a different problem. The likely cause: 4 new floors being added on top of the existing 33-story structure put more load on columns never designed to carry it. The developer called it a typical construction mishap. An independent engineer who reviewed the footage called it dangerous. The 1,600 future apartments are still on hold. We covered the full Pfizer Tower story in depth on this channel. The ignored warnings, the full timeline. Check that video after this one. This next building has been open for a decade. People paid tens of millions to live there, and it may be the most expensive structural disaster in New York City history. If stories like this keep you informed, subscribe. This city has more of these than you would think. Number 4, 432 Park Avenue, Billionaires Row. Open since 2015 and falling apart ever since. When 432 Park Avenue opened in 2015, it was the tallest residential building in the world, 1,396 feet, 102 floors. A tower so thin, its height-to-width ratio is 15:1. Here is a way to feel that. Take a pencil, stand it upright on a table. Now press it from the side. It flexes. Now imagine that pencil is 1,000 feet tall and Manhattan wind hits it from every direction, every single day, for decades. The engineering solution was a facade made of experimental white concrete, a material typically used for decoration, forced to carry structural load, the skin and the skeleton at the same time. By 2021, the Condo Board filed a lawsuit listing over 1,500 construction and design defects in common areas alone. Flooding, elevators offline for weeks after leaks entered the shaft, a trash chute that sounded like a bomb, noise so severe that one owner vacated their unit for 19 months during a pandemic while repairs were attempted. The developers called it Manhattan's premier residence. Then, in April 2025, a second lawsuit accused them of deliberate and far-reaching fraud. Engineers had allegedly identified nearly 1,900 defects in the exterior concrete back in 2016, 1 year after residents moved in, and the developers concealed it and kept selling. The facade, according to the complaint, is plagued with thousands of severe cracks that have led to water infiltration, flooding, and corrosion of the steel rebar, reinforcing the concrete columns from the inside. The steel inside the concrete, holding the building together, is corroding. The developers deny everything and are moving to dismiss. A 2025 inspection classified the building as safe, but requiring repair within 5 years to remain that way. Independent engineers have warned that without action, the building could eventually drop concrete onto the street below. The apartments still start at $10 million. Number 3. The Mitchel Houses, 205 Alexander Avenue, the Bronx, October 1, 2025. Every year on October 1st, New York City officially turns on the heat. It is a regulation. And across the 5 boroughs, building workers go down to their boiler rooms and fire up the system for the first time since spring. Routine, scheduled. The same thing every year. At the Mitchel Houses public housing complex in the Bronx, a technician went to the boiler room on the morning of October 1st, 2025, to do exactly that. The boiler exploded. The force traveled upward through a brick chimney shaft running the full 20-story height of the building, and the chimney came down, all 20 stories. The entire corner of the high-rise peeled away. Bricks buried the sidewalk, debris landed on the children's playground, air conditioners ripped from apartment windows as the exterior wall collapsed around them. 3,400 people live in the Mitchel Houses complex. 38 apartments received immediate vacate orders. 140 residents were relocated to hotels. No one was killed. Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson said, "We avoided a major disaster here." But the building had 2 active Department of Buildings violations for unsafe facade conditions dating back to 2020. The most recent, February 2024, 19 months before the chimney fell. Documented, on file, still unaddressed when the boiler fired up on October 1st. This is public housing. Over 3,000 people. The warnings were in the city's own records the whole time. Number 2, 161 Maiden Lane, the financial district, also known, by the people who spotted it long before any official admitted it, as the Banana Tower. There is a 60-story skyscraper in Lower Manhattan that has been sitting unfinished since 2019. Walk along the East River waterfront near the financial district and you can see it. A concrete skeleton, partially clad in glass, 670 feet tall. A tower slowly settling into the ground at an angle. No residents, no activity, no completion date. 80 luxury condominiums, East River views, prices starting at $1.3 million. Developer Fortis Property Group broke ground in 2015. Then came the decision. To build 60 stories in Lower Manhattan, you need a foundation anchored to bedrock. The proven way. Drive piles all the way down. Fortis chose a cheaper method, jet grouting, injecting cement into the soil to harden it. Think of it like reinforcing sand with glue instead of building on a stone table. Geotechnical reports had warned of differential settlement risk. They proceeded anyway. The soil settled unevenly. The building started to lean. By 2019, surveys confirmed at least a 3-inch tilt to the north. The contractor sued the developer. Buyers demanded their deposits back. Work stopped. Today, the building still stands, still incomplete, still leaning. The only real fix, drilling new piles through the existing structure all the way down to bedrock, would cost 9 figures. Nobody has stepped forward to pay for it. Nobody agrees on who legally has to. In July 2026, after the Pfizer tower collapse, structural engineers publicly called for an updated survey before another year passes. An unmonitored 60-story tower settling into soft Manhattan soil is not a problem that gets better on its own. We covered the full story in its own video: the foundation shortcut, the buyers who lost millions, and why nobody can agree on who is responsible. And now we get to number 1. Every building on this list got here because of a decision someone made to cut a corner, a cheaper foundation, an experimental facade, ignored warnings, overloaded columns. Number 1 is different. It got here because of a mistake nobody knew was a mistake. A flaw hidden so deep inside the math of a finished skyscraper that it took a college student writing a term paper to find it. A flaw that triggered one of the most extraordinary secret engineering operations in American history. And a flaw the people who worked in that building every single day were never told about. For 17 years. Number 1. Citicorp Center, 601 Lexington Avenue, Midtown Manhattan. The building that almost erased 10 city blocks, and nobody knew until 1995. When Citicorp Center opened in October 1977, it was the 7th tallest building in the world, 59 floors, 915 feet. A tower floating 40 feet above the street on 4 enormous stilts, each placed at the center of a side rather than at the corners, with St. Peter's Lutheran Church preserved underneath. It passed wind tunnel tests. It passed every inspection, structurally sound by every official measure. There was one problem. Nobody had caught it yet. Here is how wind loads work. Skyscrapers are designed and tested for winds hitting them straight on, perpendicular to the faces, standard, required by code. Le Mesurier had done exactly that, and Citicorp passed. What had not been fully analyzed were quartering winds, winds hitting the building diagonally at 45 degrees, striking the corners. For most buildings, diagonal winds are less dangerous than a direct hit. But Citicorp's stilts were at the centers, not the corners. Its internal bracing handled diagonal loads in a completely different and far more dangerous way. In June 1978, Princeton University student Diane Hartley was writing a term paper on the building. She ran her own wind calculations. She found numbers that did not match. She called Le Mesurier's firm. Le Mesurier reviewed his own work and then found something worse. During construction, the contractor had quietly switched the building's joints from welded to bolted. Welded joints fuse steel permanently. Bolted joints use hardware. Faster, cheaper. And under the specific quartering wind loads, Citicorp's unusual geometry created, significantly weaker. In a 70-mile-per-hour quartering wind, the building had a 1 in 16 chance of collapse. In New York City, that kind of storm could be expected roughly once every 16 years. The building had been open for one. Le Mesurier told Citicorp's executives, and then they made a decision: fix it in secret, at night, without telling anyone. The operation was called Project Serene. Starting August 1978, welding crews worked through the night, every night, reinforcing 200 defective joints throughout the building's bracing system. During the day, thousands of office workers arrived, sat at their desks, ate lunch in the plaza, and went home. None of them knew the building had a 1 in 16 chance of falling. None of them knew welders had been in the walls the night before. The city drew up secret evacuation plans for a 10-block radius of Midtown. 2,500 Red Cross volunteers on standby. Private meteorologists hired to watch storm systems around the clock. Then in early September, with repairs only halfway done, Hurricane Ella formed in the Atlantic and began moving toward New York City. For several days, the evacuation plans were reviewed. The Red Cross stood ready, and then Ella veered away. The repairs were completed in October 1978. Nobody was ever told. The secret held for 17 years, until the New Yorker published the full story in 1995. After the repairs, the reinforced building could withstand a storm expected only once every 700 years. Le Mesurier, for coming forward voluntarily, became a case study in engineering ethics, still taught in universities today. But the question that 1978 never fully answered, and that every building on this list forces us to ask again, is this. If a world-class engineer, on the 7th tallest building in the world, with full city approval, could miss a flaw this catastrophic, what else is out there? New York never stops building, never stops converting, renovating, adding floors, changing what a building carries. And the gap between a building that looks safe and a building that actually is can be measured in a single column, a single joint, a single decision to use the cheaper method and assume it will hold. 5 buildings, a construction site that buckled under added weight, a luxury tower allegedly hiding thousands of cracks, public housing where a 20-story chimney fell with warnings on file for years, a leaning skeleton nobody can fix or tear down, and a skyscraper one storm away from erasing 10 blocks of Midtown, while the people inside ate their lunch and had no idea. Pay attention to the building you live in. Look up the open violations on the Department of Buildings website. Check the inspection records. Because in New York, the difference between a postcard and a disaster is sometimes nothing more than a wind coming from the wrong direction. If you are into stories like this, buildings, engineering, the things cities try to hide, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.